Tonight, Tennant Creek comes to terms with another alleged sexual assault against a young child. A major funding boost for Australia's secretive military drone program. Joe Biden on the defensive after his memory is criticised in a report on the mishandling of classified documents. And a devilish problem for the newest AFL franchise battling for its identity against the Hollywood film studio. Good evening, Kyle Dowling with ABC News. Northern Territory Police have charged a man over the alleged sexual assault of a child in Tennant Creek. The 52-year-old has been remanded in custody to face court in Alice Springs next week. He's been charged with aggravated assault and gross indecency against a child under 10 years. Police say they responded to reports from a witness who allegedly heard a child scream and saw a man run from the scene. Chief Minister Eva Lawler said in a statement the victim and their family are being supported by a specialised child protection team. It comes almost 6 years since the rape of a 2-year-old in Tennant Creek prompted then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull to visit the town.
I was really concerned, angry and disappointed that, again, we see another young person, particularly in that town and this region.
Certainly the family is shocked and devastated, just like many people here in Tennant Creek, regarding this alleged sexual assault.
The board of embattled Northern Territory law firm NAJA has defended itself amid suggestions the organisation is unable to do its job. The North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency has been rocked for months by internal instability and a lawyer exodus, which forced the firm to stop taking on new clients in Alice Springs. In a statement released today, NAJA's principal lawyer said he was disappointed to see ongoing attacks being made on the organisation, which is simply not true. NAJA says it should be ready to take on new clients at its Alice Springs practice once again, starting with youth clients in the coming weeks and soon after adults, beginning with those already in custody. Australia will this year introduce an armed drone into military service, but details of the secretive project are being tightly held by government. Labor's also unveiled a $400 million boost to another larger and more complex program to develop a fleet of uncrewed combat aircraft for the Air Force.
At an undisclosed location, which looks very much like the Woomera testing range, a locally developed combat drone is put through its paces. While in Canberra,
excellent. All right.
Australia's groundbreaking GhostBat program receives a $400 million funding boost.
This technology has the potential to turn a single fighter jet into a fighting team.
First unveiled back in 2019 as the Loyal Wingman, the unmanned MQ-28 harnesses artificial intelligence to target enemies while flying alongside traditional crewed aircraft into battle.
We absolutely understand that manned-unmanned teaming is part of the future of air combat.
Overnight in the United States, a strikingly similar-looking product has just been unveiled. 2 years ago, the former government cancelled an order for American-made armed drones. With the war in Ukraine highlighting the importance of uncrewed systems, there's now a rush to introduce the deadly technology here. And work's underway on a secretive new program.
We are introducing into service an armed drone this year. I won't go into details.
The minister insists the details must be kept secret for now on security grounds. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
The government says it will tweak its own industrial relations legislation to ensure employers don't face criminal penalties over the right to disconnect. The bill was passed without removing that threat after it failed to secure enough support to fix the problem in the Senate.
The matter is resolved in the affirmative. I call the clerk.
A legislative stuff-up still causing confusion.
There's fines in the Act. There's been fines in the Act since, 1907.
How is it likely that fines will be handed out? How likely is it?
None if the Liberals get out of the way.
The government's been forced to admit a bungle in legislating a right for workers not to have to respond to calls, texts and emails outside of work hours, leaving open the possibility employers could be subject to criminal penalties if they repeatedly breach the rule.
It now appears that if you run or manage a business, you can face jail time for contacting your employees after hours.
There was never an intention, in my book anyway, for a criminal penalty.
Labor had tried to remove criminal penalties, but the move was blocked by the opposition, which voted against the bill.
For the government to ask the coalition to solve its problems in a bill that is rife with problems is a bit rich.
With 6 months until the laws come in, the government's vowed to have another go. As the Prime Minister seeks to frame Labor's industrial relations reform as a cost of living relief measure for the lower paid, the opposition's signalling a new fight over the proposed national vehicle emissions standards. It's warning that forcing companies to provide more efficient vehicles will drive up prices.
I just don't know how people are going to pay thousands of dollars more.
That's a contested claim, but it's not stopping the opposition.
The Prime Minister is so out of touch that he's now proposing a ute tax and a car tax to make a vehicle more expensive for families.
No accident he chose to deliver that message in the must-win by-election seat of Dunkley. Nicole Hegarty, ABC News, Canberra.
Specialist investigators are being brought in as the search for a Victorian mother stretches into its 6th day. Missing persons detectives have now taken the reins on the investigation into Samantha Murphy's disappearance. Volunteer search efforts will be scaled back over the weekend, but police say they still have not identified any sinister circumstances.
A thin band of orange, the latest line of hope in the search for missing mother Samantha Murphy.
We do hold significant concerns for Samantha's welfare at this stage, and that is growing as the days progress.
After 5 days, the investigation has turned to a new phase.
This morning, the Missing Persons Squad have taken over investigation primacy in relation to the disappearance of Samantha. I can also confirm that we have not identified any suspicious or sinister circumstances.
The 51-year-old was last seen leaving her home on Eureka Street in Ballarat East just after 7 on Sunday morning for a trail run in the Wuwakirung Regional Park, where the search has so far focused. Police say she had her mobile phone and was wearing a watch with GPS tracking.
It's obviously an ongoing inquiry with our telecommunications technicians.
But they remain unsure of the route she took. Today, SES teams set off from Buninyong, south of Ballarat. This is a detailed search through difficult terrain. The bushland can be dense, blocking some of the aerial searches. It's also a very hilly landscape, said to contain dams and mine shafts, meaning it can be difficult to see too far in any one direction. While police will continue the search, late this afternoon, confirmation volunteers will be scaled back.
If the need arises where additional intelligence or information comes in that we need to scale back up, we'll certainly do that.
Miss Murphy's husband, Mick, was seen coming and going from the police station this morning. Yesterday, he and his daughter gave an emotional public appeal.
Mum, we love you so much and we miss you and we need you at home with us.
My heart goes out to the family of Samantha Murphy at this incredibly difficult time.
Police are looking into the time leading up to the 51-year-old's disappearance as they open new lines of inquiry.
That'll be a huge part of our investigation, digging into the background, working out Samantha's movements in the days leading up to her disappearance and also the people that know her.
Jesse Thompson, ABC News, Ballarat.
The former rugby union international Kurtley Beale has been found not guilty of sexual assault. Beale says he's glad the truth has come out after a terrible year. It took the jury just over an hour to acquit him of all 3 charges.
With his wife by his side, Kurtley Beale left court with serious allegations no longer hanging over his head.
I've always maintained my innocence. My family and I have suffered a terrible year, and I'm so glad that the truth has come out.
The former Wallaby was accused of groping a woman's bottom, forcing her to perform oral sex in a men's toilet cubicle and grabbing her hips on a night out at a Bondi pub in December 2022. The veteran of 92 Wallabies tests was arrested the next month and stood down by the New South Wales Waratahs. After a 12-day trial, it took the jury just over an hour to reach their verdict, finding the 35-year-old not guilty of all 3 charges.
It has been unbearable suffering, and it really shouldn't happen to anyone.
The trial heard from multiple witnesses, including from the complainant. A recorded phone call where Mr. Beale apologised to the woman was central to the prosecution's case. But Mr. Beale's legal counsel poked holes in her evidence, using footage from inside the pub to argue that she followed him into the toilets, and successfully argued that the sexual act inside the cubicle was consensual.
Mr. Beale waited until he was acquitted of all 3 charges before dropping his head into his hands in a sign of relief and leaving the stand to embrace his wife.
Kirtley Beale's lawyer has indicated that her client will be applying for costs. Ethan Ricks, ABC News, Sydney.
Almost 2 years after the collapse of funeral insurer Youpla, the federal government has stepped in to provide support for thousands of First Nations people who lost out. For many, the package marks a win in the long fight for justice. Indigenous Affairs reporter Kirsty Wallawa has this story and a warning: this report contains images of an Aboriginal person who has died.
2 years ago, Nikki Foy and her mother took up the fight for justice after losing tens of thousands in funeral insurance premiums to the now collapsed Youpla Group.
I'm just really disgusted in how they targeted us. It was targeting vulnerable people, vulnerable communities, you know, across the nation.
While her mother did not survive to see this day, Nikki and her family are now one of 13,000 people who will recoup some of what they lost.
I hope families who are eligible can find some relief in the long-term resolution.
The federal government has announced a $97 million support program.
This is a very important recognition of those that were affected by this so-called Aboriginal Benefits Insurance Scheme.
From July, anyone who held an active policy on or after August 1st, 2015 is eligible for a bond or cash payment. They'll get either 60% of all payments made or the benefit amount of the ACBF certificate, whichever is lower.
I think it's a fair outcome for something that's caused harm to community for decades.
Concerns had been raised about the company for decades, including multiple court challenges by regulators for false and misleading conduct and for breaking anti-hawking laws. Despite this, they were allowed to deduct money from customers' Centrelink accounts for 16 years.
If there was a problem with that company, then the government should have removed them from Centrepay early, and they didn't.
The government's scheme will run until June 2026, easing some of the pain and suffering. Kirsty Wallawa, ABC News.
The Reserve Bank will consider cutting interest rates before inflation comes back to target if the economy looks like it's heading in the right direction. Speaking before a parliamentary committee, Governor Michelle Bullock pushed back against international pressure to lift rates. She said while there are some encouraging signs of cooling, the current inflation rate of 4.1% remains too high. But they wouldn't wait to cut the cash rate if they needed to. In 2016, the NT government established a plan to maximise the proportion of government contracts awarded to NT businesses. But new data has revealed the Buy Local plan failed to deliver on its primary objective last financial year. Our reporter Jack Hislop has more.
Despite some promising results through the years, the latest data from the annual compliance report show it's faltering. NT-based enterprises were awarded 71.3% of all NT government contracts in 2022-23, the lowest proportion since the plan was initiated. Compare that to the first 4 years when locals won between 80 to 81% of all contracts. And compared to a record high figure in 2021-22, the total value of the contracts awarded locally also decreased by 9% last year. In total, the government spent $1.22 billion across sectors such as construction, IT, cleaning and consultancy. The auditor of the plan says the results show its objective was not delivered by the government last financial year. But Dennis Stedman also said the data provided to him was incomplete because the NT government doesn't monitor or report Tier 1 contracts under $15,000.
Now, if I don't have the Tier 1 information,
how would I even know, firstly, how much it was, but secondly, who it was spent with?
Mr Steadman has recommended for years now that the government set up a system to monitor and report those lower-end contracts, but there was no progress made on this last financial year. It's led the NT opposition to say it will strengthen the buy local plan if elected in August.
Having that plan is a great thing, but it needs to be implemented, and of course the recommendations need to be listened to by government.
Although the government says it supports local businesses, it seems there is still a way to go.
New Year resolutions may be long gone, but doctors are encouraging all of us to be proactive about maintaining our health. GPs insist regular health checkups can literally save your life.
When she turned 47, Robin Gatira felt it was time for a visit to her doctor.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
I just went for a routine checkup, and part of that was that they discovered that I had an atrial septal defect in my heart, which was something I was born with.
She had months of medical appointments and surgery, but it was one comment from her specialist that stuck with her.
Said, "Oh, really nice to meet you, doctor," and he just said, "Well, Robin, I would have met you in 20 years' time with heart failure, so I'm glad that I've met you now and hopefully I won't see you ever again."
Early detection absolutely saves lives. It makes any sort of medical intervention much more simple and easy, and of course that helps the overall health system as well as the individual patient.
These checks are all part of a wider plan to keep Australians living healthy longer. The National Preventative Health Strategy hopes that we will all be able to have an additional 2 years of life in full health by 2030. These days, Robin Gatira begins every new year with a checkup, whether she feels sick or not.
I share this story with all my girlfriends. I just feel that it's just part and parcel of that maintenance that I do. Like I, check my car once a year and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I do.
An appointment that could save your life. Peter Gunders, ABC News.
Health authorities are trying to find 4 children who may have been exposed to a potentially deadly bat-borne virus at Ipswich, west of Brisbane. Their children were seen playing with a flying fox at a park last Saturday. Bats in the area have tested positive for Australian bat lyssavirus, which can be transmitted to humans.
It was at Queen's Park in Ipswich last Saturday morning that 4 children were seen playing with a flying fox. Authorities now taking the unusual step of an urgent public plea to locate them.
So we don't want to cause panic, but it is really important that we identify these children.
This dead bat was seen in the same place today, and others in the area have recently tested positive for Australian bat lyssavirus. It's a disease that can be transmitted from bats to people. Early detection is critical.
It's very important that parents don't wait for symptoms, but that they reach out early and we're able to support them.
This is a potentially fatal disease. This is very similar virus to the rabies virus.
Symptoms in people can include pain around the site of any bite or scratch, spasms and frothing at the mouth.
This is a terrible disease, and we've had 3 cases that we know of Australian bat lyssavirus infection in people, and all 3 have died.
The bat the children were playing with hasn't been caught or tested, so authorities don't know if it had the virus. Lyssavirus is only found in about 1% of bats, but it's present in up to 30% of those seen behaving abnormally. The one the children were with last weekend was on the ground, struggling to move. The lyssavirus incubation period can be as short as 5 days and as long as 2 years. Anyone exposed needs to be vaccinated and treated as quickly as possible. Authorities are warning everyone not to handle bats. Alex Brewster, ABC News, Ipswich.
US President Joe Biden won't face charges over his handling of classified documents and has hit back at the investigators' description of him as a well-meaning elderly man with a bad memory.
A hastily arranged national address for a president who was obviously seething.
I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet.
He was responding to a new report from a special counsel who says Joe Biden retained classified documents after finishing his term as vice president. But it's the report's assessment of President Biden's faculties which really upset him. It said the 81-year-old's memory seemed hazy and he did not remember when he was vice president nor when his son Beau died.
How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away.
But after insisting his memory was fine, he then seemed to confuse Mexico with Egypt.
The president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in.
Up the road from the White House, the US Supreme Court was hearing arguments about whether the man Joe Biden beat at the last election, Donald Trump, should be allowed to run again. A Colorado court said he couldn't because he was an insurrectionist after inciting the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. His lawyer rejected that argument.
This was a riot. It was not an insurrection. The events were shameful, criminal, violent, all of those things, but it did not qualify as insurrection.
Attention is paid to the type of questions asked by the justices to infer which way they might be leaning. It's more an art than a science, and it is highly subjective. But there was scepticism from some justices that an individual state could determine who could or couldn't run for president under this particular section of the Constitution.
Supreme Court, it was a beautiful thing to watch in many respects. It's unfortunate that we have to go through a thing like that. I consider it to be more election interference by the Democrats. That's what they're doing.
For Americans, the choice is increasingly likely to be between an alleged insurrectionist and a man described as elderly with a poor memory. It's hard to know which plays worse for voters. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
President Vladimir Putin defended the war in Ukraine and said in a rare TV interview that Moscow has no interest in expanding the conflict. He told former Fox News television host Tucker Carlson that any talk of further invasions was threat-mongering. Putin made the comments during a 2-hour pre-recorded conversation aired on the internet and on Russian state television. Carlson's interview with President Putin coincides with the US Senate continuing to block additional funding to Ukraine.
Do you think NATO is worried about this becoming a global war or a nuclear conflict?
At least that's what they're talking about. And they're trying to intimidate their own population with an imaginary Russian threat.
And now to finance, here's David Chow.
Even though the Reserve Bank governor has warned interest rates could still rise, the odds are they probably will come down by Christmas. As we heard from Michelle Bullock, the RBA is not expecting to wait until inflation actually falls inside that 2 to 3% target range. After all, her counterparts at the US Federal Reserve have openly said they plan to cut interest rates 3 times this year. So if the world's biggest economy makes such a drastic move, it'll be pretty tough for Australia to go the opposite way. Now, the RBA is worried about services inflation, as too many of us have been getting haircuts and dental checkups, apparently. But economists from Commonwealth Bank reckon we should be focusing more on how inflation is going for essential items, the things we have no choice but to keep buying no matter how high interest rates climb. And 13 rate hikes have done almost nothing when it comes to limiting the price rises for housing. In particular, building a new home, rent, electricity and insurance, which is where the government should arguably do more with fiscal policy. Meanwhile, it was a quiet day for the share market, which ended flat as gains in healthcare and property offset losses for uranium stocks. And the All Ords is down 0.6% for the week. Overseas, the S&P 500 crept to a new record high, while Japan hit a 34-year high. And Chinese markets were closed for the Lunar New Year. Oil prices jumped 3% on lingering concerns about Middle East supply disruptions, while the Aussie dollar is buying just under 65 US cents. And that's finance.
Australia has added fast bowler Michael Neser to an otherwise unchanged Test cricket squad for the tour of New Zealand at the end of the month. Neser was last year's Sheffield Shield Player of the Year, but is down on his usual output this season, taking just 9 wickets in 2 tests. He was included after West Australian quick Lance Morris was ruled out through injury. The rest of the squad remains intact from the home series against Pakistan and the West Indies, with Steve Smith opening and Cam Green to stay at 4. The Australian Opals have taken a big step towards the Paris Olympics with a 60 to 55 point win over host nation Brazil in a qualifying tournament. Lauren Jackson, who is chasing her 5th Olympic campaign at 42, played more than 8 minutes and added a 3-pointer early on. Australia led by as many as 14 points in the second half before hanging on in a tense finish. WNBA forward Izzy Megbagor scored 18 points to go with 7 rebounds. The Opals face Germany and Serbia next and need only to finish the bottom of the 4-team group to qualify for the Olympics. The Tasmanian AFL club will reveal its name, colours and foundation jumper in a matter of weeks. But as the launch date looms, the AFL remains locked in talks with a global media giant over the use of an iconic Tasmanian identity, with a resolution yet to be found.
He's wild, wacky and quintessentially Tasmanian. Tasmanian Devil is known the world over, and upon granting the state its AFL licence, was the former AFL CEO's pick as the embodiment of the state's new footy team.
When the Devils seems to make sense to me.
But just weeks out from the official launch of the new club, there's a snag.
Still a bit of water to go under the bridge there, but as I said, we're excited when launch day comes to share what the end result is with the community.
Media giant Warner Brothers expressed a willingness last year to allow the use of Tasmanian Devil, which it's had trademarked since 1984.
There's been ongoing discussion between the AFL and Warner Brothers, and I think it'd be fair to say there's been positive movements around those discussions.
But no green light on a Devil deal yet, with the AFL and Warner Brothers still in a standoff. Tasmania's former VFL club was the Tasmanian Devils, while its under-18s also play under the Tasmania Devils banner. But it's that trademark status which still remains under consideration, with the AFL seeking time extensions from IP Australia as late as last month as its discussions continue. The league wouldn't be drawn on where negotiations stood, saying only that it was looking forward to the launch of the club's name, logo and colours. Tasmania has come to agreements with the company in the past, most notably for a campaign to raise money for devil facial tumour disease in 2007. The devil isn't the only iconic Tasmanian emblem in play. How the famous map logo is incorporated into the new club's branding, also a topic of hot debate amongst prospective fans and the club itself.
It'd be really unwise for us not to celebrate our heritage, but also to point to the future. So for us, it's an opportunity, it's a creative challenge.
The AFL registered the T logo as a trademark in August, which was officially accepted last month. Not long now until Team Tasmania's big reveal, the launch confirmed for March 18th. Chris Rowbottom, ABC News.
And it's time for the weather now, and tonight's weather pick of Middle Point has been sent in by Joy Dip Roy. Morning showers and storms around the west coast. There were some showers and storms in parts of the NT north of Tennant Creek. 32 degrees, the top for Darwin today, 34 in Warramayunga. Zooming out, 33 today for Katherine and Jabiru. Borroloola reached 34. Alice Springs and Tennant Creek reached 37 degrees and 38 in Yulara. The satellite is showing storm clouds covering parts of Queensland over the north and east of the NT and parts of Western Australia, while it's mostly clear skies elsewhere. A trough stretches across the top end and northern Queensland and Western Australia. There's another trough over Western Queensland. Looking at the capitals tomorrow, 21 degrees for Hobart, partly cloudy, and 27 for Melbourne. Canberra headed for 23, a shower or two in Sydney, 26. 29 degrees and showers for Brisbane, a sunny 31 in Adelaide, and another hot one for Perth, a sunny 41 tomorrow. And looking at the territory tomorrow, top of 37 for Alice Springs, 38 degrees for Papunya, and 32 in showers and a possible storm for Tennant Creek. Heading north, showers for Katherine, 33 degrees, 34 for Bullman, and a top of 32 in Nhulunbuy. And in the west, 33 in Jabiru, and it's heading for a top of 31 in Darwin tomorrow with possible showers and a storm. There will be a low tide just after 12 o'clock in the afternoon and an evening high tide at 6:45. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:43 and set at 7:18. Showers and possible storms continuing for Darwin, and early next week could see higher rainfall totals. In Alice Springs, there could be some rain over the weekend, with a possible shower developing though the likelihood of rain could drop off near the start of next week. And that's ABC News for this Friday night. Thanks for your company and good night.